best Sooner recruiting and football news with Parker Thune and Grayson Singleton.
You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up. Lock it up.
Hit the guys up on the Riverwind Casino call-in line at 405-329-9000 or text the show on the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line at 405-651-3439.
Do it! Just do it!
Now, with Locked In, here's Parker Thune and Grayson Singleton.
Not great. Not great, Grayson Singleton. Not an awesome time to be a Sooner fan. Genuinely, this is about as low as I can recall things getting, at least in the 7 going on 8 years that I've been a part of the Oklahoma community. People are down. People are down, and rightfully so. I guess you're doing all right because you can always just go root for the Pokes, huh?
Are we doing any better?
No, I suppose
Have you
you're not.
seen Oklahoma State's basketball team? It is dog water.
Oh, man. And that's putting it kindly. The same could be said for OU athletics right now. Women's basketball is doing all right. Men's hoops, they're not making the tournament at this point, and closer to getting their coach fired than being competitive. That's for certain. Coming up on the show later today, it's not always that we talk basketball and basketball recruiting, but we are going to get Brody Lusk on the program, OU Hoops Insider, at OUinsider.com, to discuss how this program proceeds, because one of the harsh realities that has become apparent in recent days is that Oklahoma on the hoop side just doesn't have a whole lot to recruit to. Not a great venue, not great NIL, not a great on-court product. So what do you have? We'll discuss with Brody and pick his brain on what exactly Oklahoma needs to do to whip this thing back into shape and be competitive on the hardwood once again. But the bulk of what we discuss every single day, every single weekday, that is, here on Locked In, is OU football and football recruiting. This hour, of course, brought to you by Dorsey Jones Buick GMC in El Reno. Fantastic prices, fantastic staff, fantastic environment out there in El Reno. And, of course, the half-price oil changes on Saturdays. That's always worth the trip. Thanks to Dorsey Jones for their sponsorship of the program. But on the topic of football recruiting, I wanted to start out talking about one kid in the state of Oklahoma that holds an OU offer that we have not discussed a whole heck of a lot, Grayson Singleton. I mean, you think about the big three in the state. Caden Jones, Taj Overton, Mason James. OU looks pretty good for those three. They've also offered Dejon Ackerson from Putnam City. He's a kid that seems to project nicely to that cheetah role if OU can hold off the other suitors in play for his commitment. And right now you look at the offer sheet, OU is certainly the best offer that he's got. But there's another kid in the state of Oklahoma on the east side, up in the 918, that has an offer from the Sooners and that, in my mind, could very well wind up in the class. And we have not mentioned his name a whole heck of a lot on these airwaves. And that is Braden Presley. Yep, there's another Presley brother, folks. I remember watching Braden for the first time in, I think he was in 8th grade. He might have been in 7th grade. Just thinking, man, when does it end with these boys? When does it end? I don't know if they got any more coming, but Braden is the latest. Of course, as you'll recall, Brennan Presley started at Bixby, went on to play at Oklahoma State. Braylon Presley, 2-time Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Oklahoma at Bixby, spent a year at Oklahoma State, wound up transferring to Tulsa, which is where he's at now. Braden is the latest. I don't know if he's the greatest. He's certainly the tallest, Grayson, because the thing about Braylon, what really limited him as a prospect, and he still wound up a 4-star back in the class of 2022, I do believe.
Yes.
He was short. He was explosive. I mean, he was the best player on the field in pretty much every case at the high school level, but he was short, 5'6", or thereabouts. Braden is a lot more sizable. He's a good solid 6'1", maybe 6'2", and plays defensive back. So whereas Brennan played wide receiver, Braylon was kind of a jackknife offensive weapon type guy. Braden is a defensive back that has played corner at Bixby for much of his high school career, but that the Sooners have offered as a safety. And as we look at how the safety room is shaping up, it was announced today, and I hate to give credit to a competitor as much as anyone else, but far be it from me not to give proper attribution. It was the folks at On3, Chad Simmons specifically, that reported high 4-star safety Caden Hall from the state of Florida is going to take an official visit to Oklahoma at the Champ U Barbecue in late June. But you got Caden Hall, you got a guy like Jacob Eberhardt from St. Louis, you got a few other safeties in the mix, but it's not entirely clear what the pecking order is. It's certainly not as clear as it has been in recent years what the pecking order is at safety for Oklahoma. The three guys that they wanted last cycle were Jonah Williams, Amarian Robinson, and Marcus Wimberly. They wound up getting 2 of the 3. And everybody knew, okay, that's kind of where it starts and stops. Those are the guys. It's a lot more wide open in this 2026 class. You'd expect that Oklahoma takes at least 2. Maybe there's a world they take 3. And maybe in technicality, your third safety is a guy like Ackerson who projects to multiple spots. But there's a very good chance there comes a point in time at which Oklahoma really decides to put the full court press on Braden Presley and just lock down a very talented in-state football player to add to their 2026 class. I know you've gotten the chance to watch Braden Presley quite a bit in recent years. Have you? How many Bixby games have you done?
I did 1 game this year.
Okay, gotcha. So you've seen him in person. You've obviously watched the tape. Is Braden Presley a guy that you think Oklahoma should make an early priority, i.e., just go get him locked down in April or May if you can swing it, as opposed to circling back in August, September? Maybe he's already committed somewhere else, but he's down the road. You figure you got a good shot, and other options have dried up at that point.
I think you'd go with the latter. And the reason I say that is, number one, he presents a lot of versatility. He has skills to play wide receiver. He can track the ball, and that translates obviously to his primary position as a corner. There just is such limited tape of him as a safety. He didn't do a whole lot of it at Bixby. He was the corner opposite of Emery Snyder, who has started to gain traction in his recruitment.
Yeah, I like him, man.
I like Emery Snyder a lot too, which, by the way, when you pair Emery Snyder and Braden Presley, that might be the tallest corner duo in the country, because Emery Snyder is borderline 6'3", 6'4". So in terms of if you want him to play safety, he's a guy I would kind of kick down the pecking order a little bit. He's got an offer from Kansas. He's got an offer from Kansas State. If you look at some of the recruiting sites, a lot of people have this as a race between OU and Kansas State. I think there are better safeties. There are more natural safeties than Braden Presley right now, but you can't go wrong if he's a guy that you end up bringing in. I do think it's interesting, though. Let's just say hell freezes over again with the wide receiver room. He is a guy you could think about trying at wide receiver.
Let's just hope hell doesn't freeze over.
Right.
Again. Let's hope that's not an actual conversation we're having.
And he hasn't played as much wide receiver as, say, Jacoby Johnson. Like this isn't a apples to apples comparison with Jacoby Johnson when he was coming out of Mustang, but he does have that sort of versatility. So he would be a very interesting guy to have in your room if you were able to bring him in, because you could do a lot with him.
It's crazy, man. And the state of Oklahoma, as I've done my best to compile a comprehensive list, it's so easy just to lose track of a guy like Braden Presley, who maybe isn't as out there with his recruitment, like not advertising his own brand and his visits and all of that on social media a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah.
It is a really, really deep class in the state of Oklahoma in 2026. Now, I don't think it's as top-heavy as it has been in recent years. Like, I don't think you're looking at a year like, oh gosh, what was it, 2022 Gentry Williams and Robert Spears Jennings year, where there were probably 10 to 15 legit P4 football players in the class, high-end P4 football players. I don't think you have as much talent, at least broadly at the very, very top as you have in the past. But per last count, and I was just tallying this up last night, Grayson, I count 35 players in the state of Oklahoma that have FBS offers. That's a lot, especially at this point on the calendar, because Lord knows there will be other guys that pick up offers throughout the year.
Right.
So by the end of the cycle, we could have 50 guys in the state of Oklahoma with the opportunity to go play FBS football. I look at a guy like Caden Bramlage, the big offensive lineman from Shawnee that doesn't have an offer yet, but he'll probably get him here before long. But 35 players right now. 6 of them. Only 6. I'm sorry, 5. 5 for right now. Only 5 of them have OU offers. Mason James, Caden Jones, Taj Overton, Dejon Ackerson, and then Braden Presley. Now, I will say this. To your point about Braden Presley not playing safety in high school, I am less inclined to regard that as a major issue for Brandon Hall and the OU safeties room than I would have been before the whole Michael Boganowski experience. Because if you recall, it was kind of a similar deal with Boganowski where he played linebacker in high school.
Right.
And I do believe Oklahoma was the only school that recruited him at safety. Everybody else wanted him to play linebacker. And so to see the way that Boganowski has been able to translate pretty seamlessly to that safety spot, learn on the fly to the point where Oklahoma was giving him snaps in conference play. We're not talking garbage time snaps, but they were letting him go out there and play meaningful snaps as a true freshman at that safety spot. That suggests to me that if Brandon Hall sees safety in Braden Presley, he can probably make it work.
And here's the thing about Presley, too. I mentioned the ball skills and his ability to track the ball in the air. Is that not more of a more valuable asset at safety than it is corner? And don't get me wrong, he's a great corner. He can play zone, he can play man, he can play press coverage, he can play off. He can do all that stuff. But if you can track the ball, you're a quintessential free safety.
Yep.
Now, here's the thing. When I watched Bixby, and I watched a decent amount, he didn't make a whole lot of tackles. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that Bixby's front 7, led by Cord Nolan, who's gaining P4 offers at linebacker, that front 7 got after people a lot to where him and Emory Snyder, Trey McLaughlin was back there in the defensive backfield, to where the DBs didn't have to make a whole lot of tackles, to be completely straight up. So, and tackling, I think, is more of an impetus at safety than it is at corner. So that's one thing we haven't seen. But to your point about Brandon Hall converting Boganowski from linebacker to safety, I think it's a little bit easier to go from corner to safety.
It should be. It certainly should be.
I mean, you see people do that all the time, and vice versa. So if that's what they want to do, and he's earned that reputation of being able to turn guys into safeties, cool.
Gunny of Stutzman Army says if you can track the ball, you either need to be safety or center field. That's right, Gunny. Put him back there at the very tail end of the defensive backfield where there's a lot of green.
Well done by you.
I knew Gunny would appreciate that. Puerto Rican Sooner says, the LNC is frozen over, so close enough, right? Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
918 listener says, why no interest in the running back from Valiant, Oklahoma, and the sophomore quarterback from Broken Bow? To be clear, Kenny Golston, the running back you mentioned from Valiant, and the sophomore quarterback from Broken Bow, Graydon Howell, those are both guys that are on OU's radar. Like, it's not like they have no interest in them. They're actively keeping an eye on them. But I do think Kenny Golston probably projects better to the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side. He's just, to me, he looks like a linebacker. He looks more like a linebacker when I watch him than he does a running back, at least the collegiate level. He's a great running back at the high school level. I think he might be a better linebacker at the collegiate level. Graydon Howell, the sophomore quarterback from Broken Bow, that kid, he can ball, man. And I'm not even convinced that his collegiate future is at quarterback, not because he can't throw the ball. He certainly can, but because he's athletic enough to play other spots. He's athletic enough that if senior year of high school he decides, you know what, the whole quarterback thing isn't for me, or maybe there's a limited ceiling on this thing because he is not the tallest dude. He is not the largest in stature. He's probably about 5'10". If he decides, size is a bit of a limiting factor, maybe I should go play wide receiver or even defensive back, I think he could pull that off. So Graydon Howell is a guy that you mentioned he's a sophomore. He's class of 2027. There's still plenty of runway for OU to get involved with him. I don't imagine they're going to get involved with Kenny Golston at this point because look at the running back room. I should say the running back board in the 2026 class. Caden Jones, Jonathan Hatt, and Rylan Morris are all right there at the top. And Kenny Golston, good player that he is, he's a far cry from those three, just in terms of overall talent at that position, the aptitude at that position. And then if you wanted to take a look at him at linebacker, Oklahoma has plenty of options and an ever-expanding plethora of options at linebacker with guys like the Jandro brothers from Arizona, Braxton Lindsey from Rogers, Arkansas, Nick Abrams from Maryland, and the list goes on. So don't think they'll wind up moving on Kenny Golston. I could very well see him moving on Graydon Howell. Okay, let's hit a break so we're on time for our chat with Brody Lusk. He's going to join us coming up next to discuss OU's hoops recruiting efforts, what they look like right now as the program continues to scuffle in year one in the SEC, and what the path forward is for Oklahoma to get the talent on this roster back where it needs to be competitive in the SEC and in the NCAA tournament. So Brody Lusk joins the show next. Stick around. You're listening to Locked In here on The Ref, the home of Sooner fans.
This is Sooner linebacker Kobe McKenzie, and you're listening to The Ref, home of the Sooner fans.
Connect directly, bid confidently. At Purple Wave Auction, transparency is key. With no reserves and no hidden surprises, you're connected directly to sellers so you can inspect and bid on quality equipment with confidence. Whether you're looking for ag, construction, or fleet equipment, we're here to ensure a clear, hassle-free experience. Register today at purplewave.com and start bidding with peace of mind. Purple Wave Auction, the easiest and most straightforward way to buy and sell equipment.
Does your business need a trusted electrical advisor to help with repairs, maintenance, service changes, or upgrades? Don't just trust anyone. Choose Wade Electric, a family-owned company with over 50 years of experience. Wade Electric has an extensive portfolio of completed projects in new construction, remodels, and service. We specialize in a variety of electrical installations like accent lighting and automation, landscape and security lighting, shop and outbuilding wiring, and more. Call Wade Electric today at 405-329-1940 for all your electrical needs.
That twinge in your knee isn't going to wait until Monday, and neither do we. At Orthostat, we've expanded, so you get better hours, better facilities, and the same great care. Open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. Whether it's sprains, strains, fractures, or joint pain, from knuckles to knees and every joint in between, our same-day, affordable care gets you back to life faster. Visit OuchOrthostat.com to learn more.
March is almost here, and the home of Sooner fans is ready to make the best 68 team giveaway better than ever again this year. Join us Monday, March 17th for the Ref's 24th annual 68 team giveaway, live at Buffalo Wild Wings off of 19th Street and more from noon to 7. The Ref's 68 team giveaway is presented by Riverwind Casino. Riverwind Casino. Good times, great rewards. The Ref, the home of Sooner fans, and your home for the best giveaways this March.
Snakes, zombies, sharks, heights, speaking in public. The list of fears is endless. But while you're clutching your blanket in the dark, wondering if that sound in the hall was actually a footstep, the real danger is in your hand, when you're behind the wheel. And while you might think a great white shark is scary, what's really terrifying and even deadly is distracted driving. Eyes forward, don't drive distracted. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
I thought mixing bleach with my floor cleaner would take the stain out.
When my youngest ate the dog's medicine, that was a new one.
I was trying to protect my garden, but I accidentally sprayed myself with pesticide.
So I called 1-800-222-1222, the poison helpline.
A poison expert helped me figure out what to do next.
I was connected to someone who spoke Spanish.
They answered my questions.
It was free.
It was confidential.
It was real help in real time.
Keep the poison experts in your pocket. 1-800-222-1222.
We all make choices about alcohol. Kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye, Dad. Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, Em.
Remind me about that party again?
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations, and they want honest answers in everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path, because when you talk, they hear you. Learn more at underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Do you like to stand out in a crowd while wearing the best in OU apparel? The Jimmy Austin Pro Shop carries the best brands you can wear to work or even dress up events. Lines such as Lululemon, Travis Mathew, FootJoy, Greg Norman, Grayson, or Turtleson with the OU and Jimmy Austin logo are sure to catch everyone's eye. You don't have to be a golfer to shop at Jimmy Austin. They also do corporate special orders for you and your company. Call them today, 405-325-6716, or visit theougolfclub.com for more information. If you're having a rough day, just be grateful you still have both feet. Apparently, LeVar Ball doesn't.
I saw this.
LeVar Ball had to have his foot amputated? That's what I'm being told on the Twitterverse by Legion Hoops.
I mean, we probably want a little bit more of a reputable source than Legion Hoops, but
I believe it was originally reported by TMZ, so...
do with that what you will.
There's a photo in the story, too.
Oh, is there really?
Yes, of LeVar with a stub, so...
Oh, okay, there you go.
It appears to be real. I tell you, you know who plays like he got his foot amputated? That bum Sam Godwin. On that note, we welcome to the show Brody Lusk, who does a phenomenal job covering OU hoops for OUinsider.com. And needless to say, the OU basketball program is not in the most fortuitous of circumstances right now. 16-10, trending heavily downward as far as their chances to make the NCAA tournament. And obviously Porter Moser's job security has come into significant question. And Brody, we do a lot of recruiting talk on this here show. So first and foremost, I want to ask you, man, how hard is it going to be this offseason for OU to get some juice on the recruiting trail, regardless of how this season wraps up, if you don't have a great venue, you don't have a great NIL offering, and the on-court product over the last 4 years has been mediocre to say the least?
It's going to be very difficult. And it's been difficult for Moser, in his 4 years, but he's actually recruited pretty well considering the circumstances. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's a combination of a bunch of different things. One, you're recruiting to the worst arena in the SEC, and it's not even close. Two, they've never made a tournament under Porter Moser. Three, Moser has not coached an NBA player. And Jeremiah Fears has a good chance to go to the league, but, hadn't coached NBA player prior to that. And then you don't have top-tier NIL. So recruiting with all of that, it just makes it extremely difficult. They just had a top 40 recruit on campus for the LSU game, J.J. Andrews. I can't imagine that visit went that well, considering the result, that collapse down the stretch, and the atmosphere was poor. So yeah, it's been tough for Moser, and if Porter Moser's tenure at Oklahoma ends, it's going to be the same issues for whoever follows him up as head coach at Oklahoma.
Brody, I'm glad you ended with that, because we've been talking about potential replacements for Porter Moser for the better part of the last 2 weeks. I was the first one on this station to throw out the name Will Wade. When I say that name, he has coached an NBA player. He coached Ben Simmons. He went to the NCAA tournament 3 of 5 years with LSU. Went to the NCAA tournament 2 years with VCU. When I bring up the name Will Wade as a potential replacement to Porter Moser, you say what?
I say it'd be a home run hire, but I don't think they would do it. And I think Will Wade, if I was a betting man right now, I would bet that he ends up coaching somewhere in the state of Texas or at Ole Miss. It kind of just depends on how things shake up with Indiana. If they go get a Chris Beard, or if Texas moves on from a Rodney Terry, maybe Buzz Williams leaves Texas A&M. I think Will Wade would definitely prefer those openings. I don't think he would have a ton of interest in Oklahoma, but I think it would be not very smart to not give him a call. And I have my doubts they would give him a call, considering, the compliance issues that may be there. But I do think Will Wade would probably be as good as a hire as Oklahoma could make.
The Sooners' liability right now, Brody, is certainly on the interior. Sam Godwin, Luke Northweather, Mo Wiggy, it's just not up to snuff by SEC standards. But when we look at Oklahoma's 2025 signing class, two really solid big men in Kai Rogers and Andreas Holst coming in. And so obviously if you have a coaching change at season's end, which is not a guarantee, but I think is the consensus expectation right now. If you have a coaching change, you're going to have to work to keep those guys on board and prevent them from asking out of their letters of intent or financial aid agreements, I suppose is what it is now. But if you can hang on to Kai Rogers and Andreas Holst, do you see either of those guys as the type of dudes that can come in as true freshmen and make a difference in the paint for Oklahoma?
Absolutely. I was just talking last night during that Florida game. Kai Rogers would probably start on this team right now. Very, very solid defensively. Very good at blocking shots. He's actually, in the overtime elite league that he plays in, a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. And so I think retaining him has to be one of the top priorities. If you can retain him, you have a freshman big who very well could start as a true freshman. And Andreas Holst, I've talked about him with a couple of people who are very well tapped with basketball players overseas. It sounds like Holst, he's definitely a project, but he could give you 10 to 12 minutes off the game or off the bench, in any given game. So I do think between those two guys and then a wing like Alec Blair, you do have three freshmen coming in who all three will have a chance to contribute right away, and Kai Rogers, who will have a chance to start right away if he stays at Oklahoma or wherever else he would go.
When it comes to recruiting, Parker laid out all the scenarios that would work in Oklahoma's disservice. We talk about the arena. We talk about a potential coaching change. The team just stinks ever since we've gone into conference play. What is the recruiting pitch now to whether it's the portal or high school players that you're trying to get to the University of Oklahoma? What does a potential staff even recruit to?
Playing time. I think that's got to be the main thing right now. That's a big reason they landed at Jeremiah Fears. You can tell Kai Rogers, hey, look at our front court this year and tell me you don't think you could start, right? So I think playing time's the biggest pitch. Pair that with some, you could offer some decent NIL for some of those high-profile guys. It's not going to beat out a lot of teams in the SEC, but it's decent. And so, it's hard to sit here and list a lot of things that I think Oklahoma has going in its favor. But playing time in what is the best conference in the SEC would probably be the number one thing you have, maybe one of the only things you have going for you. So, yeah.
Brody Lusk, fine Oklahoma basketball reporter from OUinsider.com, is our guest here on Locked In. Brody, I don't think anybody knows the ins and outs of this program quite as intimately as you do. How big of an issue is NIL for OU Hoops right now? Like, how realistic is it that this product could be fixed absent another significant infusion of cash into Oklahoma's pool with which they can go and acquire talent?
Yeah, NIL is an issue, but it's not the only issue. And I think part of the truth that I don't think a lot of people realize, the main reason they're losing out on a lot of these big-time recruits isn't just NIL. And NIL can cover it up, right? Like, you come with a big bag and all of a sudden people, the right amount of money, I'll play at the LNC. But NIL definitely an issue. I don't think it's the issue, though. But, if they did have more NIL, maybe you have a Brandon Garrison on this roster. And if you have a Brandon Garrison on this roster, then all of a sudden I think you're looking at an NCAA tournament team. And I don't think we're sitting here talking about, Porter Moser's job security being up in the air. So NIL definitely could fix a lot of the issues. I think the main place where NIL could fix issues for Oklahoma on this roster would be the front court. The way I look at it, like the front court in basketball is very similar to how the trenches are in football in the SEC. You have to have a solid front court player to win in the SEC. Same way you have to have a good offensive line. You have to have the guys up front on the defensive line in the SEC in football. And so I think that's what they're lacking, and I think an influx of NIL could definitely help solve some of those issues.
Brody, let me ask you this: on when you talk to recruits and you get their sense of what the vibe is like being recruited by Oklahoma, it's my understanding that basketball largely serves as a television product. And right now, games at the LNC, because of the lack of fan attendance, sometimes suffer as a television product, where these guys, are watching and imagining themselves playing in that arena. Do you get the sense when you talk to these recruits that the fans not showing up, even though they're not terribly satisfied with the product on the court, do you get the sense that the fans not showing up is playing to the detriment of Oklahoma trying to reel in some of these kids?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I'll say that, the Oklahoma staff knows it. If you look at the three guys that they're bringing in, all three of them did not visit in season. They waited till the summer to bring them in on their visit.
Oh, my God.
None of them saw the atmosphere of the LNC. And so, there's a reason that's happening. Even Jeremiah Fears didn't visit, during the season. So and maybe if he had visited during the season, he wouldn't have been at Oklahoma. But I do think the recruits, they realize it. I was talking with a recruit that, had taken a visit to Oklahoma, and, you kind of go through your questions about how the visit was. It's kind of at the point where I don't even need to ask about the atmosphere anymore. It's always just like, oh, the atmosphere, it wasn't that good. Every recruit says it. They all see it. A lot of recruits want to play, in an exciting environment. And so when you've got Oklahoma offering, and it's basically every game you're playing at home is a glorified scrimmage, how do you say no to a team like Texas, who you could go play at the Moody Center? It's a great environment. And so I definitely think it has a big impact on recruiting. And I think that there's a main reason why these guys that they're signing have not seen an LNC environment.
Now, Brody, before we let you go, want to ask you, Oklahoma hasn't had an NBA draft pick since Trae Young in 2018. 7-year drought right now for the program that is poised to come to an end because Jeremiah Fears, in all likelihood, is going to be a top 10 draft pick, certainly a first-round draft pick at this point. Is that going to give Oklahoma any sort of juice in the recruiting game to be able to say, hey, we just had a stud guard in the lottery conversation after 1 year here? Does that maybe give Oklahoma something more to recruit to than it otherwise would look like?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that would definitely help. You can kind of look at some of these more high-profile guys and say, hey, look, we just had Jeremiah Fears come in, and he was a reclass, and we gave him the keys out there, and he developed his way into a lottery pick. So that would definitely help. It won't help much if Porter Moser's not the head coach, but, I do think that Fears going in the lottery, which it's highly likely he's a lottery pick, even though there's been some struggles from him in SEC play, I do think it would definitely help the pitch Oklahoma could make to someone like a J.J. Andrews, who's a top 40 recruit, just visited in that LSU game. Maybe you can, have that type of a pitch to a Jalen Montanati at Owasso, hey, come in, you'd be the guy. We just had a freshman be the guy and go lottery. But, also in that same point, anyone can look at it and say, look at last night's game against Florida. Jeremiah Fears has a great game, scores 22 points, but there was no one else doing anything in the first half. And it's there's only so much you can do. And I think Jeremiah Fears would have benefited from having a much better big man around him. Some of these assists at the rim, it's a pass to Sam Godwin, and it's a missed wide open layup. And so I think, yes, it would help a lot, but I think some recruits will also look at the supporting cast and say, well, it might be a little bit harder to develop with this. But yeah, short answer, yes, it would help to see Jeremiah Fears go in the lottery.
Brody, always appreciate your time. We'll let you get back to your Wednesday. Thanks so much for being willing to stop by and talk OU hoops and recruiting with us.
Yep, thanks, guys.
Again, that is Brody Lusk. Does a fantastic job covering OU hoops at OUinsider.com. He wrote an amazing column on Monday.
Which one?
He wrote an amazing column on Monday that basically laid out, and it's available at OUinsider.com for subscribers over there, but basically lays out all of the issues that have compounded upon one another to create the comatose environment and the comatose ecosystem that is OU basketball right now, and laid out some possible solutions, how you can go about fixing the issues that plague this program. But ultimately, where he kind of wrapped it up, spoiler alert, is that you got to make a change at this point in leadership, if only for the sake of revitalizing things and just getting some new blood into the program, a new direction, a new vibe. Like, convince me at this point, Grayson, because Jeremiah Fears isn't coming back, right? Jeremiah Fears, there's not a chance he's playing college basketball next year. I don't care what anyone says. Convince me that anybody on this roster, except for Dayton Forsyth and Cool Attack, who is redshirting right now, should return. Convince me that Oklahoma shouldn't just tell everybody else to walk.
I mean, I'm not going to try to make that argument for you. I can't. By the way, to the Brody Lusk article point, it's an exceptional read. It is a very good read. And I mean, here's why ultimately I like to put things very simply. My life is pretty simple, Parker Thune. Simply put, here's why you have to make a change. Name me one thing this team is good at.
I cannot. I can't do it.
They're not. And once we've gotten into conference play, there are one of two results that have happened. They're now 3-10 in conference play, and they lose 10 games by one of two ways. Either one, they're blown out, or two, they have some exceptional ability to find a way to lose. Mm-hmm. And then you combine that with your team not being good at literally anything, you got to make a change.
It's not a rosy outlook right now. Not by a long shot. Okay, we'll dig back into OU football and recruiting talk on the other side, but we're due for a break here. 405-651-3439 is the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line if you want to chime in with questions, comments, opinions. Stay right here. We're not going anywhere. This is Locked In on the Ref, the home of Sooner fans.
Bleed Crimson? Love great Sooner talk? Join the Ref Army by downloading our free app. Toby and TJ, Plank and Josh, Steelman and Thune, and Teddy and Tyler. We have the Sooner experts. The Ref is home to Sooner fans worldwide.
Fall in love with OKC's favorite casino.
Because at Riverwind, we've got it all.
Grab a bite at one of our many restaurants.
Or sip and spin at our high-stakes area.
And the Showplace Theater at Riverwind is the hottest spot for live music.
Shoot your shot at our $80,000 Cupid's Quest giveaway.
For the best gaming and unforgettable entertainment.
It's gotta be Riverwind.
The Ref is the home of Sooner fans and is once again your home for chaos. Every game-changing hit.
Long fly ball to left. Track. Whoa. Gone.
Every strikeout.
Got him. Swinging.
Every defensive gem.
He caught it. He caught it.
Every game. All year. The Ref has you covered.
Catch Sooner baseball at the Round Rock Classic against Minnesota Friday at 2, Oregon State Saturday at 4, and Virginia Sunday at 4 right here on the Ref and the K-Ref app.
For 3 generations, the John M. Ireland and Son Funeral Home and Chapel in Morris continued to serve the community by giving back to local schools, charitable organizations, and first responders.
We provide pre-planning for funerals and cremation services at the most reasonable prices.
We are proud to be a family-owned and operated funeral home.
Award-winning funeral home year after year, our family believes in serving the people of our community.
I'm John Ireland.
And I'm Solon Daniels.
You've got our word on it.
Life is yours to spend. Spend it making more money. Spend it making more memories. Spend it learning a new skill. Spend it teaching an old trick. Spend it career climbing. Spend it mountain climbing. First United Bank. Spend life wisely.
Confidence comes from knowing you're getting a great deal. That's why we're offering Confidence Ford employee pricing for everyone. The same exclusive prices our team enjoys, with fantastic savings on new 2023 and 2024 models in stock. Now is the perfect time to drive home in a brand new Ford. Visit us online or come see us in person, conveniently located at 825 North Interstate Drive. Confidence Ford of Norman, a Cavender Auto family dealership, where confidence is Cavender.
Does your business need a trusted electrical advisor to help with repairs, maintenance, service changes, or upgrades? Don't just trust anyone. Choose Wade Electric, a family-owned company with over 50 years of experience. Wade Electric has an extensive portfolio of completed projects in new construction, remodels, and service. We specialize in a variety of electrical installations like accent lighting and automation, landscape and security lighting, shop and outbuilding wiring, and more. Call Wade Electric today at 405-329-1940 for all your electrical needs.
Schumacher Law Group, when experience matters. Tracy Schumacher is a former prosecutor and former district judge. Whether it's a probate challenge, criminal charges, or contentious divorce proceedings, experience matters. The attorneys at Schumacher Law Group provide compassionate, knowledgeable advice, all while fighting for your best interests. Find Schumacher Law Group online at lawgroupok.com or call 405-701-1882. Hometown lawyers ready to fight for you when experience matters.
Children are the greatest joy and our best hope for a better future. Friends, they are the future. But did you know that millions of kids are facing hunger every day? Food is not just food. It's energy, health, confidence, hope, and even love. Yes, love.
Thank you!
Learn more about how No Kid Hungry is helping end child hunger in America at helpnokidhungry.org.
Oh, somebody on the text line said, I'd like to be the first to welcome Porter back next year because you don't make athletic budget cuts that OU is making and then pay 2 buyouts. Counterpoint, maybe that's exactly why you make the cuts. Although I don't think so.
Also on the text line from the 405, how can a team that is struggling with keeping up with NIL justify a $7 million buyout? And I will echo what Parker said maybe 45 minutes ago, maybe longer. Those come from 2 different sources.
Well, they have. I was reminded that per Kevin Stitt's executive order
then there was
a couple weeks ago, the athletic department can now technically funnel money into the NIL collectives. So there is that. Maybe, you know what? Hey, maybe Joe C goes mafia mode this offseason, and he's like, okay, Porter, you have 1 year. I'm going to buy you an insane roster, and you better win with it. Then they go out and spend, I don't know, $8 million on a bunch of 1-year transfer rentals. If you win, you win. If you don't, okay. Now you're history.
Do you think that plays into the way Porter coaches, though? Because you have to remember his background's at Loyola Chicago, where when they busted onto the scene, that was all juniors and seniors that had been together.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like that's not the same thing as accumulating essentially an AAU team.
Well, and
what you would do if
you can't build a roster anymore, you know? Like
Just
not like
true.
the way you used to.
But I'm saying, does that work best for Porter?
Well, and that's kind of my big question is like, is Porter capable of building a new school roster as opposed to building an old school roster? Because building an old school roster was easy. You'd go recruit the talent out of high school, you'd redshirt the guys, they'd learn. Whenever they were ready to break into the lineup over the next 4 years, you'd plug them in. These days, man, how many guys are you going to see stay at the same institution for 4 years of college basketball? It's going to be a rarity, man.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're good enough to jump to the league, you're going to jump to the league before year 4. If you're not good enough, but you're worth it, you're at least worth the roster spot, and you're worth the playing time, then at some point some other institution is going to offer you more money.
Yeah, I mean...
And if you're not good enough to warrant the roster spot, then they'll just process you.
And especially in this day and age, if you've got a bunch of guys who have been in college for 3-4 years, chances are they're not the best guys. The days of Dalton Connect being in college for 5 years like he was and then being the 17th overall pick in the draft by the Lakers, those days are coming to an end.
Maybe Dayton Forsyth will be the rare OU lifer.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe, just maybe. The poll question on YouTube, and if you didn't know, now you know. We are live on YouTube every day. Just search KREF Sports. You'll see my face and Grayson's face when you do.
Probably be surprised what I look like.
No lies detected. The poll question on YouTube. Where should OU primarily focus their recruiting efforts? In football, most specifically. The three options that we gave you were Southeast, because, well, you're in the Southeastern Conference. The Mid-South, because, well, your institution is located in the Mid-South. Or the Midwest, because it's a very broad area of the country that has a lot of talent. And then, of course, you can write it like you want them to go recruit California. Okay, great. You choose the other option. 70%, and this isn't all that shocking, 70% voted for the Southeast. That Oklahoma should make it a point to establish deep recruiting ties in the Southeast. And they're starting to do that, Grayson. Confirmed this morning over at OUinsider.com, and I had initially reported it about 3 weeks back that Kamarian Johnson, the four-star defensive end from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, was planning to take his OU official visit at the Champ U Barbecue in June. He has officially locked those plans in. So OU's going to get the last shot at one of the very best players in the state of Alabama, and that's not a state they have been able to touch yet in the Brent Venables era. That's not a state that they have been able to touch in a long, long time. I mean, the only Alabama Sooner in recent memory that I can recall was Bauer Sharp, who was originally from Dothan, Alabama, but obviously transferred his way in via southeastern Louisiana. So there's that. If you can get Kamarian Johnson, that gets you into the state of Alabama and maybe gets your brand taken a little bit more seriously down in those parts. But Oklahoma, they have had a little bit of success in Florida. They have been able to go down to Florida and get talent. Think of, Lewis Carter, for instance, as a guy that they went and pulled out of the Tampa area. They've got strong ties at IMG. They've been able to tap that pipeline repeatedly over the last several years. R. Mason Thomas is another guy that they went down to Florida to grab. So the Sunshine State OU does okay. Georgia, though. Georgia is, by most measures, the fastest growing state in the country when it comes to high-end high school football talent. And so you have got to get into the state of Georgia. Georgia and Alabama, non-negotiable, especially if, as 70% of you suggested, you want to see Oklahoma primarily recruiting out of the Southeast. If you're going to recruit the Southeast and you're going to recruit the best in the region, you have got to get into Alabama and to Georgia. The only Georgia Sooner that Oklahoma has successfully landed in the Brent Venables era, you know this one? Can you recall?
Give it to me.
Zion Reagans. Zion Reagans out of Jones County, Georgia. He is the only one. And obviously plenty of OU fans have beef right now with Zion Reagans, so we won't dwell on that for too terribly long. He just needs to bulk up, which he will. He'll be a fine player. But that's the only Georgia Sooner that Oklahoma has been able to land under Brent Venables. Alabama, still untapped. Now, Louisiana has talent, certainly, but the vast majority of that talent is always going to go to LSU. The Sooners do have a chance with Peyton Houston in the 2027 class, as we've mentioned, but the big players in Louisiana historically have been LSU, Texas A&M because of College Station's proximity to the state, and then Alabama has come into Louisiana from time to time over the years and been able to steal some top-flight guys. But Louisiana, Mississippi, I mean, that is the juice really worth the squeeze down there as far as building relationships at schools that you can continue to go back to? Probably not, but there are those schools all over the place in Alabama and Georgia. I think about like Clay Chalkville in Alabama as a school that produces P4 talent year after year. Florida, think about Jones down in Orlando. Miami Central down on South Beach. Those feeder schools are everywhere. At some point, though, you'd like to see OU get a feeder school of its own, right? Wouldn't that be nice? Regardless of where it's at. Wouldn't you like to have a school that's sending its players to OU on a regular basis?
Which is interesting because how has that not been one of those East Side schools up there in the 918? as dominant as they've been in football over the last, quarter century, how has Oklahoma not developed a pipeline through there?
There's an easy answer, and then there's a more nuanced answer. You want me to give you the easy answer?
We've got, 6 minutes left in the show, so give me a combination of both.
The easy answer is that Lincoln Riley neglected it, and the Sooners are still paying the price 3+ years after Riley departed. The more nuanced answer is, 918 is just a little bit different, as I'm sure some of our 918 listeners can attest. Yeah, there's a strong affinity for OU up there, but there's also a pretty strong Razorback presence, and Arkansas has been able to tap the 918 repeatedly in recent years. It helps you, certainly, when Arkansas is not very good.
Right.
But you can turn around and say, well, OU's not very good right now either, and that to an extent, that's true. Kansas has started to recruit that area. Kansas has money.
And they've done so pretty well, too. I mean, just go back to Chris Harris Jr.
Kansas State has made a big play into the 918 in a couple of recent cycles. And so Nebraska as well. Nebraska hasn't really they haven't really broken into the 918 yet. But I think they're going to be a problem in that region too. And so the 405, Oklahoma's sway in the 405, at least in my opinion, from where I stand, my perspective on it is that Oklahoma's pull in the 405 is quite a bit stronger than their pull in the 918, and that's just kind of natural because I think other schools see the 405 as OU territory. Okay, well, we might as well not bother. Those guys are probably going to Oklahoma. But if you're looking at the 918, you're saying, okay, well, Arkansas is just as far from Tulsa as Oklahoma is. There's not going to be nearly as automatic of a pull. And Manhattan, too. Manhattan's
not very far
2.5, 3 hours up the road. So, there's not going to be as automatic of a pull to OU if you're in the 918 as if you're in the 405. So, that, I think, is why Oklahoma doesn't have a legit feeder school in the 918 right now. But think about some of the most successful programs in the country. Right? Texas is a great example, and I'll use them as an example here.
DeSoto.
Because they have DeSoto. DeSoto kids go to Texas.
They do.
The DeSoto kids that are good enough to go to Texas, they go to Texas. And that's how it's been. Drew from Blarmont says it's called Carl Albert. Carl Albert's probably been the closest thing that Oklahoma has
I would agree to that.
A feeder school in recent years, but that was really just because if you go back, Carl Albert hadn't sent a kid to Oklahoma on scholarship in close to a decade until Xavier Robinson, and then they just so happened to have 3 guys there in the 2025 class. Well, 4 for a while because Kevin Sperry was there.
Right.
But 3 guys that graduated from Carl Albert that were big OU guys wanted to stick around, wanted to be great in a Sooner uniform. So there has been that recent boon at Carl Albert, but even so, there isn't that history to back it up.
And if you expand that history just a little bit to maybe the last half decade or so, there's been more guys from Carl Albert that have landed at Oklahoma State. At least there's been a couple.
Mm-hmm. There's a pretty good kid in the 25 class that landed at Oklahoma State. Carl Sean Young,
yep. Really good basketball player, too, by the way.
Yes, he is. Fantastic athlete. He'll do well at Oklahoma State.
I think he will.
Yeah. That was just one offer, and he shut it down, right? I was surprised more schools
he did shut it down after he got the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm. Hawaiian Sooner says, feeder school, not Washington.
Still salty about that one.
Still butthurt over Nate Roberts. I get it. Recruiting Boomer says, Florida did too. Or I'm sorry, he said Ohio State stole a recruit at Owasso from us. Florida did too. Then he transferred to Mizzou. Yeah, Chris McClellan. It was Chris McClellan.
Who was the one that went to Ohio State?
Dax Hill.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. That goes back a few years.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, man, 918, it's open season much more so up there than it is in the 405. So if Oklahoma could get one of those DFW schools to start sending their dudes to OU on a regular basis, that would be huge. Kind of figured for a minute there that maybe it would be Geyer until things crash and burn with Jackson Arnold.
Right.
And now, you know.
I mean, they even got a basketball player from Geyer, too.
Yeah, Davion Harmon.
Davion Harmon came from there.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for correcting me, Ohio Sooner. Dax Hill was the one that went to Michigan. It was Josh Proctor.
Josh Proctor,
Josh Proctor was the one.
I was about to say,
Ohio
Dax
State.
Hill that plays for the Bengals now did go to Michigan. Could it be in the DFW? Could it be a school like Prosper? Could it be a school? How did it not become Allen?
After Kyler Murray?
Exactly.
That's a great question. Great question. And Theo East was an Allen guy. Michael Hawkins was an Allen guy for the first 3 years of his high school career. So maybe that should be on the agenda for Brent Venables and the OU staff. Just spend as much time as possible at one big school at DFW until you convince their coaches that, hey, you got a prospect, you're going to send him here. Okay, that's all for this Wednesday installment of Locked In. Grayson and I will see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, with more OU football and recruiting talk. Don't go anywhere right now, though, because on the other side, it's The Rush with Teddy Lehman and Tyler